able to spring for some chickens or some goats.
Nice.
For some people that are in need.
I have a question before we start. When is your interview?
My interview is postponed. I'm not doing
You need to do one.
Permanently postponed.
Maybe next year again will ask.
I agree with you. He told me no.
Yours is missing. Yours is one of the most dramatic ones.
When is your interview?
My interview is postponed.
You forgot to mute it.
What are you doing?
You
then?
need to do one.
Permanently.
Maybe next year.
Oh, my phone is not muted. That's no, we're live streaming. You forgot to mute it. It's
Anyway,
my phone.
I'll take that
Yours
to
is
heart.
missing. Yours is
And
one of
I'll
the
talk
most
to you about
dramatic
it.
ones.
All right.
When is your interview?
Let's
So
go.
anyway, you can feel free to look after the study. If you don't care, just give me money. We're not talking about a lot of money either.
Did you
If
bring
everyone
pictures?
kicked in $5 or
Is there a
$10, we
baby?
could.
There is a baby. A very adorable, very, very cute.
And I got to
very
believe
tiny.
these animals are still alive from last year. They're producing eggs and milk and cheese and
That's
feeding a whole
beautiful.
bunch of people. I made sure, Carl, I was telling everyone that we collect. I've done it for a long time, from either Samaritan's Purse or World Vision, and we give animals to needy families overseas. And
So you're collecting tonight for that?
tonight or next week, it doesn't matter, but we always do animals that are, what's the word? They produce them.
Is it a girl?
I mean, I suppose you could slaughter the chicken.
Everly
Have a
Ruth
nice
Lawson.
chicken dinner, but eggs are
I
bad.
think I never heard you say.
Well, you get both with the chicken, right? You get the eggs and then
I
you
got the first
We'll get that
donation.
started. We'll get that started.
We're on our way to at least.
We got chicken?
She's got a
the
totally
attention
symmetrical
to
face,
this.
including her dimples.
Well, I was gonna do that with my class too, but we're not meeting, so.
I love
I
her
was
little
gonna
dimples.
have my
It's
class
like
do the
God
same
went,
thing.
Oh, you're so cute.
I figured
And she's so tiny.
All right,
Like
we're working on
yesterday,
chapter
she
11
finally grew
tonight,
out of
and we're about to get started.
diapers.
So David's the green light.
We've been on.
We're
So
on.
if you're online and if you want to give, let us know.
Yeah, if you're online and you want to give either World Vision or Samaritan's Purse, we give live animals to a family in need overseas, typically chickens, goats, ducks. We've done sheep, but something that will produce food for them in the years to come.
Contact us through the website fccefree.com.
FCCEfree.com, and we need to feed people so they can hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Father, thank you for bringing us here tonight after a 2-week hiatus. Thank you for the blessings that we've seen in our lives this year, and as this year draws to a close, Lord, we want to thank you for everything that's happened, everything that's going to happen, the balance of this year. But most of all, we want to thank you for your word and for your truth that has set us free. We thank you for your Son. We pray in the name of the Father, through Jesus Christ our Lord, by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, John chapter 11, let's just refresh where we are. And we can do that by looking at the last verse. 3 verses of chapter 10, after the 2 of the I am statements from John, I am the door of the sheep, I am the good shepherd, in John chapter 10. The Jews' response to this was, let's kill Jesus. And verse 40 says he went away across the Jordan to the place where John had been baptizing at first, and there he remained. Many came to him, and they said, John did no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true, and many believed in him there. So he continues his ministry east of the Jordan. Now, how do we know east of the Jordan? If you go back in John chapter 1, verse 28, you'll see that this is called Bethany, east of the Jordan. It's got some Aramaic names, I should say, to the place. It's a whole sidebar study because this place is not that easy to find or name. But that's where he is. He's east of the Jordan. You have a map, you look at the Dead Sea. All you have to do is go right above the Dead Sea, find a map, and move just a hair to the east. And that's where this town is supposedly located. So let us begin. If I could have a diligent reader read 16 verses, 1 through 16. We can begin.
Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, in the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. But when Jesus heard this, he said, This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was, and then after that he said to the disciples, Let's go to Judea again. And the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going to go there again? And Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. And he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. And the disciples then said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Therefore Thomas, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, so that we may die with him.
Thank you. So obviously this chapter is going to be about the miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead. The I am statement we're going to encounter here is I am the resurrection and the life. Just for summary's sake, he has told us in chapter 6 that I am the bread of life. He's told us in chapter 8, I'm the light of the world. Jesus has said in chapter 10, I'm the door of the sheep and I am the good shepherd. 2 more statements. Here he's going to say I'm the resurrection and the life. When you think about it, spiritually speaking, from the Bible's perspective, what do you think of when you think of death? Physical death.
It's permanent.
Permanent. Physical death is permanent. How about its origin?
Sin.
Sin.
Fall.
The fall. This isn't physical death just really a result of what sin has done in our spiritual life. So physical death is the end of our life, and it separates people. Who does it separate? The living and the dead. Doesn't take a genius to say that, so I volunteer. But spiritual death is the separation of people from what?
From God.
From God. And it's really a loss of life because our life is in God. So it's a loss of spiritual life. So Jesus has told us that he has come that people may have full life. We saw that in chapter 10. We know from chapter 3 that if you reject Jesus, you will not see life. And then your destiny is the second death, the lake of fire. So I think we all have a good understanding of the difference between physical death and spiritual death, physical life and spiritual life. So who is this Lazarus? Lazarus is mentioned in the book of, obviously in John chapter 12, the next chapter, John chapter 11. I told you about where this Bethany is. And Luke here is going to add some more information on Mary and Martha. And in the next chapter, we're going to see that Mary's the one who puts the expensive ointment, we'll call it perfume, on the Lord and wipes it with her hair. Because Mark's gospel was written before here, there may be some listeners, readers of this, that already had knowledge of Mary. So I don't think the names of these two are new to them.
I thought it was Mary Magdalene who put the perfume or the oil on his feet. Is that what you're talking about?
No, not in Mark chapter 14. If you turn back to Mark, where I'm referring to.
So Mary Magdalene is somebody other than Lazarus' sister?
Yes. Jesus is anointed at Bethany. We don't have to read it all, but just for point of reference, if you read Mark 14, 3 through 9, you'll see that it's Mary, the same Mary that anoints Jesus in John chapter 12. You'll see that clearer, so we don't have to go there today when we get to chapter 12 next week. So back to John 11. The first thing that pops out to me is the sisters immediately think that Jesus is going to respond right away. But he doesn't go right away. Why doesn't he go right away?
To prove he can raise him from the dead.
Right. Because it's not for lack of love, because verse 5 says he loves Mary, he loves Martha, and he loves Lazarus. So what was he waiting for? He could have gone right away.
He was waiting for him to be really dead.
No, but that's a good point. I love the humor in that. Yeah, so he's talking about people being mostly dead.
Lord, he's thinking.
It wasn't fear of the Jews. It wasn't lack of love. It was timing. He was waiting for the right time in his Father's plan that would have the most effect. Because Lazarus' death would not result in permanent death. And the point and the focus of the story is on Jesus' ability to claim, I am the resurrection and the life.
It's a foreshadowing.
Yeah.
He says in 4, Jesus says, this sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God. So he's telling them this, and there's got to be some purpose for why he's telling them this before he goes there. And I think it's because he is showing them that every word out of his mouth can be trusted. This sickness is not going to end in death. He said it, and it didn't. He died, but he was raised.
But he's saying for the benefit of the people he's with, because the sisters, if you follow it in verse 3, they sent him the message.
Yeah.
And we heard it, he said, he didn't go back and send them the message.
Yeah.
He's saying it to the people around him. Because he is going to ultimately show his glory through this. I think it's appropriate for us, because we have petitions and requests before God, correct? We all do. We have in our past, we will in the future. We've got to understand that God's timing for response is not necessarily what we would want, but it's what he wants. It's according to his will and purpose. And here, as Corinne said, it's crystal clear. It's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And in spite of the love he had for the three of them in verse 5, he's going to wait 2 more days.
Well, I think he waits 2 more days also because, well, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but when Lazarus came out, I mean, he stunk from being dead for that long. And so there was no question that Jesus brought him back to life.
That's for the people's sake, because at this time, when he got the message, Lazarus was dead. He
Yeah.
tells us that in verse 11, and
Right.
12, and 13.
But waiting even longer proves that, I mean, he was,
That he wasn't
He was-
in a coma or something.
right, he was so dead that his body smelled.
Right. I think it was for the
Really,
people.
really dead.
I mean, Jesus didn't need the delay for himself, that's clear, or to do God's will, except in the sense that Jesus would be glorified, so no one would say, well, he wasn't really dead. I think you're right on there. But his disciples, they have a problem with it. Because they're saying, you go back there. Now, the Bethany, where he's going back to, is 2 miles east of Jerusalem. It's actually on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. You know, we're talking about a mountain. It's not a giant mountain. It's not Pikes Peak, but it's big enough to have size to it. And you go down the slope, you know, when you walk over, if you're here in Jerusalem and you walk down through the Kidron Valley, up the Mount of Olives, there's another side to it. You want to picture that in your head with my hand. And you're over there and you're in Bethany.
It's on your map you gave out.
Good. So for him to go back to verse 40 of chapter 10, he left because they were trying to kill him. So his disciples are saying, well, it's going to be too dangerous to go back. Now, what's his answer? His answer is very poignant.
I'm not sure I understand that when he talks about there's 12 hours of daylight.
There are 12 hours in a day.
There's
If anyone
24.
walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not with him.
No, he's making a picture story here, so I'm just not sure.
I think when Jesus was away from the people that were just wanting to kill him, essentially out of sight, out of mind. And they couldn't see clearly while they were standing with him, let alone if he's not there.
Yeah. Anyone else have a thought on that?
Well, I can believe it's Jesus is the light, so when Jesus is with you, the light is with you. I'm not sure what it has to do with him going back.
Well, he's walking in the light, and when you walk with Jesus in the light, you don't have to be afraid of anything. There's no fear.
Okay, that's what he's saying.
But if you live in the dark, associated with evil, it's dangerous. If I had to sum that up, I'd say as long as you follow God's plan, no harm will come to you. And I think the point is, if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. I mean, think about their daily routine. They worked as long as there was daylight. Right? Once it was dark, it's time to stop working. So going to Judea is what he considers part of working during the day in the light under the protection of the Father. And that's why he's saying there's 12 hours in the day, and if you walk in the day, you won't stumble. You have nothing to fear. But, because you see the light of the world, but if you walk in the dark, different story, and have a different outcome. So to us, it's a little confusing, but to their understanding of day, they work from sun up to sundown.
So he wasn't talking about himself then? He was just talking about literal day and night?
No, he was talking about himself, that he's doing the will of the Father, but he's also, I think, making application for the people around him that as long as you continue to walk in my light, in other words, you work out there in the daylight, and at night you don't work. And he's trying to apply it spiritually and saying, as you follow God, you follow me in the light, you'll have no problem. And that's why he says at the end, but if you walk in the night, you'll stumble because the light is not in him at the end of verse 10. That make sense? Or anyone want to add anything else? I think there's application though, because he's saying clearly, at least to me, it seems to be saying that they should respond to Jesus while he was in the world because he's the light of the world. And you won't have this opportunity when I'm gone, henceforth it'll be dark. And then he goes on to say the little discrepancy about what it means to fall asleep. Notice he calls Lazarus his friend. And you know, when I looked at the scriptures in the book of Acts especially, after Christ came, for the Christian, it's regularly called sleep. Why is that?
Because we'll wake up again. We're not really dead, only physically.
We're back to Joanne. We're mostly dead.
We're mostly.
Well, I don't know if folks knew that Pat Rossi passed away last night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and
My teaching makes you think of the strangest things.
well, no, what I was thinking about was along with this was the fact that Pat couldn't wait to go home. Mm-hmm. And so, I was talking to some pastor friends today, and I mentioned that I'm in theory, I'm going to talk to somebody about next steps. But, really sad, I said, there's nothing to be sad about. That, that everybody that she knew is gone, and Pat couldn't wait to go home. And so there's joy in the process. I think that's kind of the idea here, is the fact that, for us, our next waking moment is in the presence of God.
I felt so badly her being in that institution during COVID, and
Well, she couldn't be seen. It was
And she couldn't
we
come
tried
in.
forever. But yeah, it's
It
one of those
happened
things
all of
that,
a
so for
sudden.
her, I think that's the idea, that for Christians we fall asleep, because for a Christian to die, more Christians need to know that today, that for a Christian to die is, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. And so they had a very different understanding of life than we do. And as a Christian, we should.
Well, I think they had the correct understanding for
Yes.
the most part. The ones who got it.
Yes.
Obviously, these people Jesus are talking to right here, they don't get it.
Well, this is before Jesus rose again.
Right.
So it's
So we'll give them a pass, but you're absolutely right. The Christians should understand it, that when you die, it's not the end of the game here. You spend eternity with God. Which brings us into 2021 pandemic talk, because what I'm noticing with my own family and my friends and my employees is a massive fear. Massive fear drives everything that I see them do. So, case in point, I've got a problem with my water heater. And I went to the building of the man who built the facilities, building apartments next door, and I opened the door. His secretary/girlfriend was there, and I was going to ask him, who installed it? Who do I get to repair it? And next thing you know, this girl comes around the corner, puts her foot on the door. I know your wife, and I know you're not vaccinated. You can't come in here. Wow. We only let vaccinated people in here.
isn't that against the law?
And they're the ones who are spreading it.
So now I'm talking through a 2-inch window. They got the door cracked, and I'm asking, and they're talking to me, and finally the owner comes out, and he says, open the door and stop this stuff. And he talked to me like a person. But what I noticed most, the point of the story is the fear. Mm-hmm. And the fear is because they don't understand what Jesus is saying here. They don't know God. They don't have any faith. They don't believe. And they're afraid of dying because they think it's the end.
the same fear in the church, so.
No, I know. But this was just a case in point. So it underscores in the church the need to understand that when we die, we live forever with God. Now that I'm not trying to slight death in any way. And I'm not saying that it's not scary. We still have this body of flesh. We still have fears. But there's got to be a sense of peace as well as a sense of joy, because we know where we're going. So it's a great time, this pandemic, to witness and to evangelize. And I got the
understand
opportunity through
if
that
you're-
Jewish window to say, you know, you guys would be so afraid if you knew where you were going after you died.
But even so, if they're not vaccinated, then they're in good company.
Right, but
If they're vaccinated, then what do they care?
But you're emphasizing
Does the vaccine
actually-
not work, or does it make it worse?
No, but what you're talking about here, you're actually talking about the problem. The problem is everyone wants to get technical with how the disease spreads and all the statistics. And I think you should reconsider that, because the bigger problem are the people without God. That's the bigger problem. Without God, you have fear, because you don't. I watch it with my own family. They're petrified. My sisters and my brothers, petrified, because they don't know what's happening. They're scared.
Well, I have
And
to
that's
say,
because they don't have God. So you can give me all the science you want.
I
It won't
wouldn't
change
want it
their
again.
mind one iota. Not one iota will it change it. Because they'll come back with their science. And the two scientists will just keep doing this. You could prove them wrong over and over and over again with all the statistics you want. And it won't convince them at all, because it's fear, because they have no God. And I think these people here with Jesus are going through the same thing when they talk about sleep. They wrongly assume that Jesus is saying that Lazarus had not died. He was just sleeping physically, like we'll all do later tonight. Matter of fact, he's on his way to recovery, and if he sleeps a little longer, he'll probably get better. That's what I think they're thinking here.
So why is Thomas thinking that he wants to die with him?
Well, we'll get to that. Jesus is speaking about one
Let's
thing.
just go and
the-
die with him.
The disciples are thinking about another.
I think he says he wants to die with Jesus because they're going to kill him if he goes back there, is what he says.
Yeah.
They say. So they don't want to die. He doesn't want to die with Lazarus. He wants to die with Jesus.
And
Perhaps
Jesus
he's
puts
being
it all to bed
sarcastic.
saying clearly that Lazarus is dead. Why does he say, for your sake? I'm glad I wasn't there.
Because then they
For your
wouldn't
sake, I'm
believe.
glad I was not there.
Because he wouldn't be in this state of decay.
So the people
And
that
they
he's
wouldn't
with,
know. They wouldn't get it.
so his disciples, or the people that Jesus is with, can see the glory of God.
Well, now we get to the twin. Didymus, Aramaic for the word twin. The old doubting Thomas, that will find how deeply he doubts in verse 20. And ironically, here he takes leadership. Here he shows his commitment to Christ even to death. I mean, it shows his ignorance to something. Because he's saying, let us also go that we may die with him. And I can't tell, but knowing Thomas, he's just saying, I'll die with him. He's still awaiting the fact that if you believe in Jesus, you'll live forever.
None of them got that at this point.
But was he
No.
being sarcastic?
I don't think he's being sarcastic at all.
I do.
Sounds more like Peter.
No. I think he's saying,
Peter would say
let us go and we will die with him.
So we can die with him?
So he still doesn't understand.
He doesn't. And he's saying, you know, remember, the disciples are all afraid of going back. Jesus is going to get killed, and we'll get killed along with him.
He's so earnest here. If it's not sarcastic, then it's earnest. And he's willing to die up until chapter 20. When he changes his mind and he doesn't believe anything.
Until he touches Jesus. I don't think there's any chance he's sarcastic here. I have to give you my opinion. I mean, I just don't. I think he's saying, as a brave statement, I'll die with him. I just think it shows him a complete lack of, I think it shows his ignorance about Christ's atoning death, about the cross.
But none of them understood that.
No, none of them did. I'm not picking on Thomas. I'm just saying this is because he's telling his fellow disciples, basically as a rallying cry, look, we've been with him this long, let's all go die with him. Because you're absolutely right, they don't understand it. And the most ironic thing is on another level, this is going to be the destiny of all the disciples. They truly are going to die with him. You know, they all end up in martyr's death. I think one of the most fascinating Bibles I've ever seen, Bill Millett had it, and he brought it to my house one night about 3 years ago, and it had an introduction. It was an old family Bible, it's about yay thick. But in the introduction, it went through every apostle what happened to him, which is not biblical. It's historical, and some of it's quasi-questionable, yeah.
Because we don't know what happened to John. We know what happened to Moses, but I don't know that we know what happened to John.
Well, John died in
John
Ephesus.
didn't know what happened.
John died in Ephesus.
John died in Ephesus, we know he was the bishop of Ephesus. But as far as whether Andrew was here and the other guy went to India, there's a lot of stuff in conjecture, but it was fascinating. But I do know that we can point to at least some of the disciples as being martyred. So they truly will die with him, but not in the sense Thomas is doing it. He's making it sound like it's going to be a fist fight. Bree, you did such a good job. Can you read 17 through 27?
Sure. So when Jesus came, he found that he'd already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" And she said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world."
That's good right there. Take it home and read it over the next couple of days, over and over again. It's just such a wonderful passage. There's so many things to get out of this, from the trivial to the profound. Bethany's 2 miles from Jerusalem. What trivial thing can I pull from that? Later on in the chapter, now I know why there's many Jews at this scene of this. It's only 2 miles away from Jerusalem. It also prepares us for the climax of Jesus' ministry in Jerusalem. Now, what happens when a Jewish person dies? The standard fare is get him in the ground as quick as possible and mourn for a period of time. Today's day and age, we'll sit shiva for 7 days. That's HIVA. We sit and we mourn, and people come to visit us and bring food and tell us how much they love our love. And you just sit there in mourning clothes. And they just visit you all day and at night. And sometimes you make yourself unavailable and your children take over, it depends who died. So that's what it is today, and it's not dissimilar to what it was back then.
Why did they, in the Old Testament, put ashes on their heads? What is that symbolic of?
It's a sign of mourning.
The ashes are, what is, when you...
Well, ashes is a sign of mourning because when people die, you go to ash.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Dust to dust. So it's a symbol of death, a symbol of mourning. And it was considered a very pious, a very religious and proper thing to do to comfort the bereaved. So Martha runs out and meets, and what a confession of faith. She really believed, this isn't criticism at all, just so you know. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not have died. I don't take that as criticism of her at all. I think that it's just incredible faith.
$22.
And then she says, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And what's his answer? Your brother will rise again. Now, if you look at the original Greek, again, it's not in the Greek. I love it just saying your brother will rise. And when it sets the stage for just the rest of the dialogue here. Because what's going on? She didn't have any sense of an immediate resuscitation. She had no idea that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But she's certainly showing us that she believed in the final resurrection at that day. So they've done this right according to the book, just like Ananias and Sapphira. If you read that story in Acts 5, it's around verse 26. They died, they got him in the ground. People mourned. Lazarus dies, given in the tomb, he's in his grave clothes, all wrapped up, and Jesus comes along and says, your brother will rise. And Martha says, I know he'll rise. He'll rise on the resurrection of the last day. Who else thinks that way?
No one at that time.
No, that's not true. There's a whole group of people that think that way. They believe in the resurrection. Who's the group of people that believe in the resurrection?
Pharisees?
Pharisees. Right. And it actually says it in the Bible that the Pharisees believe. And if someone asks me where, I'll eventually remember it. It's in Acts.
It's the end of Acts when
23?
right before Paul goes to right before he goes to Rome, in the 20s, early part of the 20s.
It's in 23 before the council. Yeah, it's right before the council.
Yeah. Right side of the page,
Yeah,
way down.
for the Sadducees say, yeah, it's in 23a. Sadducees say there is no resurrection nor angel in the spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all.
Yes.
So good, we all agree we're all right.
So where do they get that from the Old Testament? Because that's,
Where do the Pharisees get it?
yeah, where, how do they back up their beliefs?
I don't know the answer to that offhand, Carol. I know that they're probably familiar with Job. They're probably familiar with his statement that, among others, I know that my Redeemer lives. I don't know chapter verse for that. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Judaism had a long history of understanding that you go to Abraham's bosom, that the son is going to lead them out, and all that.
From Bible verse perspective.
Some spot. We got David saying, "One day I'll see my son. I can go to him. He can't come to me."
Oh, that's right.
So,
thank you for that. That's
yeah.
a good verse to use.
You
And
gotta-
they know that well.
yeah, you got a couple of the Psalms. I want to say somewhere in the 60 to 85, somewhere in there.
Let's stay with the one with David, because that's the go-to for them.
Yeah.
So now the big I am statement in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. The fifth great I am statement, that numbers matter. So a believer, when they die, it issues new life. The new life that's spiritual, that goes on forever. It's eternal life, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe I shouldn't say new life. So the end of physical life is only a sleep for our body until the resurrection into life. So what happens when we die as believers? Our soul, our spirit goes to be with the Lord, right? 2 Corinthians 5:6, to be absent with the body is present with the Lord. Philippians 1:23. When we die, now eventually we know that, our bodies will raise and will be reformed and be together, but when he says I am the resurrection and the life, he's talking about he's the source. He's the Lord of life. So there's no paradox here. Whoever believes in me, when they die, yet he shall live. He's talking about eternal life. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die, because you'll die physically, but he means spiritually here. You won't die. And when he asks, do you believe this? Martha gives the greatest confession of faith you can find, one of the greatest in Scripture. I believe 3 things. Look at the 3 things she believes. First, you are the Messiah. You are the Christ. I'm familiar with the Old Testament. I'm familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures. I know what was promised. You fit the bill. You're the Christ. The same confession that Peter makes in John 6:69 when he says, who do you say I am? Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. The long-awaited Messiah. Secondly, what does she say? You're the Son of God. Again, from the Old Testament. We can go right to Psalm 2. For that one.
Stephen,
Okay.
for Carol's question, Daniel 12:2.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah, that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, is in verse 1, who has charge of your people, but you shall be a time of trouble, such as never been since there was a nation till that time. Till that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Psalm 2:7. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Trust me that that's not about David. That's about the Son of God. So you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God. And what else does she say? Literally, it says in the ESV, who is coming into the world, but literally it says, you are the coming one. You are the one who was to come into the world. You came to do God's will. She still doesn't have a hint about the miracle that it's about to say. Now, the coming one is significant because of a few things. In Psalm 118, what's the famous line that's quoted at the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday? What does everyone say as they're throwing palms on the ground? Blessed is...
Here comes the name of the Lord.
Right.
This is the one.
Hosanna.
Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. She's saying he's the one who comes. Another recognition of his deity. Another recognition of Messiah. Another recognition of Christ. So she totally gets it. She totally gets it. And she gets it in an Old Testament sense, as we read about it in the New Testament. She's one of the Jews who articulates, that's why I love this section, because she articulates it so beautifully and so intricately, because now there's no doubt. You know, someone in her family, inspired by God, did what it said in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 6. When she was up, when she was down, when she was walking, wherever she was going, someone was teaching her the ways of God. So she could recognize that you are the Messiah. You are the coming one. You are the Son of God. And now she's about to be freaked out. So we'll continue with 28 through 37. Do you have a different volunteer, or do you want to keep going?
Okay. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in her house and consoling her, they went and saw that Mary got up quickly and went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where the Lord was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. And then he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews were saying, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not this man, who opened the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man also from dying? So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb.
Okay, let's just stop there, just for a second. We'll talk about that little passage. The Jewish mourners follow Mary. She doesn't have a private session with Jesus, which may have been his intent, I can't tell. She falls at his feet, which she has done previously, if you read Luke chapter 10, and gives him the same greeting. Where am I missing this? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This tragedy could have been averted if he had simply been present. Her faith is sincere in him, but again, it's limited. And you know what? This whole emotion that Jesus is showing now with the weeping really shows that God came in the flesh, fully man, fully God. It's almost, when it says he's deeply moved, there's many interpretations of that Greek word. Some say groaned, on the border of anger. And when you look at it that way, I started to think, why would Jesus be so deeply moved when he knows that he can raise him from the dead? Doesn't make sense.
I think he saw Mary's grief.
Yeah, he did do that. I'm going to throw something that's extra biblical at you just for food for thought. I can't quote chapter and verse here, but knowing how Jesus particularly and God the Father are so upset with sin, I started thinking whether he's angry at what Satan has done, bringing death.
Well, I think but Adam's the one that brought death. Satan didn't do it. Adam did.
No, I know that, but he introduced him to it.
And yeah, and I think he was angry. I think he was absolutely furious at what this is the result of sin.
Yeah, and I think if I had to summarize it, I'd say he's angry about sin, death, and Satan.
Yeah, but it's
It's almost like it didn't have to go like this.
nope.
He's grieved. I don't know if he's angry. He's grieved.
But think about it, though. If you just think about grief, he's about to raise him from the dead. So it could be, and I'm not trying to be presumptuous and know the mind of God, but I'm saying to myself, if he's about to raise him from the dead, what's he crying for? What's he upset? What's he deeply moved? What's he agitated? Bordering on anger.
Well, it's when didn't he cry over Jerusalem too? Because of their unbelief.
Yeah.
So maybe this might be a little bit of, I have to keep doing these things so that they'll believe.
Yeah, so I don't want you to
I
think,
don't
though,
know.
what I'm trying to point out is when we lose someone we love, we get really sad and we cry. Okay? That may be part of it, but I don't think it's the whole story. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, you said,
What was that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's hard for us because we don't take sin as seriously as God does. And so I think that's what makes it hard for us to recognize is that Jesus knows that God's intention was that we would walk, that when he created us was to walk in relationship with him forever. And it was the sin that broke it, and the day that you eat of this, you will surely die.
Right.
And so I think that because God takes sin so much more seriously than we do, that we see this anger, this
Right.
grief that it's a grief that really, even in it, the Greek here, it's almost an inconsolable type grief.
Right.
And I think that's why.
And when you think about it, when we lose a loved one, and many of us have, and many of us will, we tend to focus on the particular, how it affects us. I lost my mother to a brain aneurysm. That's because there was sin in the world. That was never the intention. This has opened my eyes. I'm not trying to walk more righteously than anyone here, but it's opened my eyes to a whole new way of grieving. I'm going to grieve over the sin in the world that caused the problem. And I'll still miss the person and I'll grieve over that. I don't deny that. But you read all these posts on social media about cancer and how awful it is. I have cancer. I have 2 different kinds of cancer. But that's because there's sin in the world. Agree.
I think it's a lot more personal. I mean, 33 says, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews that came with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. I think he was moved by Mary's grief. I think that it was really personal.
Oh, I'm not disputing that.
It wasn't just about sin. It wasn't just about.
And
It
I'm not
was
saying
about
was-
her.
It wasn't just about sin. He was seeing the grief of everyone that loved this person. He loved Lazarus as well. Verse 5 says he loved Mary, he loved Martha. He is fully human, so he has grief for losing a loved one. He sees other people.
I think
I'm just adding, I'm not taking away from that claim, but what I
We
want to
can't
add
miss out
to
on the personal, because it is personal.
it
It's
is,
really
but I want to add that other
personal.
part to it because I don't think enough people look at it. So I'm emphasizing that on purpose.
But Stephen, if what she says is true, it is because of sin. And sin is personal. There is no such thing as a private sin. Sin is personal, it affects others, it affects everybody. And I don't think that we don't want to miss that. I mean, he's going with this, and he's feeling the grief, and he's moved in there. But why is that? Because of why death is here.
I also see the relationship he had between both Martha and Mary and Jesus. And secondly, between Jesus and Lazarus, there's a relationship between there. There's a connection, a deep connection to the point where he could be moved.
So I think the lesson is it is personal, but let's not lose sight of the sin that troubles him. Because this was not God's design for creation. Okay, let's go to 44 and read the part that I stopped at, starting at 38.
So Jesus again became deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." Martha, the sister of the deceased, says to him, "Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he'd been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it, so that they may believe that you sent me." And when Jesus had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." The man who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
So Mary's weeping. Martha is reminding him of the sting after 4 days. The whole scene we could really dig into because in the Jewish world, remember, if they're exposed to a dead body, it's a real problem. It's defilement. You got to go through a whole bunch of steps to get clean again. So typically, you would have to ask a family member before you remove the stone, and there would have to be an incredibly good reason. We don't see all this behind the scenes stuff. But what we see is Jesus saying, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So in my mind, I'm saying, outside the scripture, Martha went and said, "Go ahead, guys, move the stone." But there's also some people there that just might have obeyed Jesus. But in any case, the stone is moved. Probably a rock formation made of limestone, cut out, the stone in front. The stone is removed after Jesus reminds Martha of his earlier promise that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God. And what's he do? He simply thanks his Father that you have heard him. Now, he knows he's doing the will of the Father. Why do you think he did that publicly? Thank his Father. Besides him being obedient as the Son of God.
So you
But
could-
isn't there another reason?
As an example for the people looking around and watching it, and for us. We thank God in all situations.
We are, and I think he wanted the people to see he's been sent by the Father, and it would cause the people to maybe change their mind and have faith.
And he's doing this through God.
Yeah. He doesn't just want to be a miracle worker or a wonder worker. He wants them to see. It reminds me of the passage in 1 Kings with Elijah. Remember when the prophets of Baal and what was it? It was about the water in the trench.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught that before, Dan. I knew you had.
Uh-huh.
What is the fire of the Lord fell. Elijah the prophet, yeah, it's in chapter 18 of 1 Kings, starting at 36. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known that this day you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. As Elijah demands this answer, I see a parallel because I see Jesus asking God the Father for the same thing, to show evidence that is coming from God, not from man. Remember, these people around him, as Dan pointed out before, they haven't come to faith, many of them. Some of them have. We see Mary and Martha acknowledging, but it's a process. Their faith is small, their knowledge is limited. Until after he's resurrected, it becomes much fuller. And you see that in the lives of all the people in the book of Acts. So he has to say things like this to get them, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe you sent me. And it's not some magical mystery tour. I knew I'd be able to quote the Beatles tonight. Remember when we studied a while back that Jesus' sheep know his voice? He shouted loudly, and he came forth. He only used 3 words. Lazarus, come out. I love the thing that St. Augustine said that if he only used 2 words, come out, all the dead would have rose. From the beginning of time, we put Lazarus in front.
I just sort of felt bad for Lazarus because he's in heaven, having a good time up there, and now he's come back.
Well, he's showing the glory of God.
I don't think he
And it's
complains.
a special power must have.
He doesn't respond
It
to
sounds like he walked out dressed like a monk.
Yeah, I guess that would be where that comes from.
But what a picture. I am the resurrection and the life. I have the power over life and death. And what a picture of God bringing life to people. When you think about what theologically what the Bible teaches that for his saints will be raptured and will be given everlasting life. That's one example. Another one is he comes back in the Daniel 12 passage for the Old Testament saints, and they're given eternal life. And then in Revelation, the tribulation saints. And now we see him speak. And Lazarus comes to life. And what a picture of what has happened spiritually, because doesn't Ephesians say that who's dead, people who have faith, who are dead in their sin and trespasses, by their faith, they have now have life.
It's like baptism. We get baptized.
Exactly. And that's what Ephesians 2, first 10 verses of chapter 2 said the same thing. You know, when it says, you who were far off have now been brought near. You've been given life. Now we're going to see this, we're going to just go a couple minutes longer so we can finish this up. When he reveals who he is, the Son of God, the coming one, the Messiah, it only can bring two responses. For many Jews, this miracle is proof that he is who he said he was. So in response, they trust him and have faith. But for other people, their hearts grow hard. I don't care whether you call it sin or confusion, it's all the same. It's against God. So we're going to see them go to his enemies, and I'll just read the end here and we'll see what happens. Many of the Jews, therefore, had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. That should tell you what's important to them. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it's better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. What he's talking about there is all Israel, wherever they live. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. So think about that. It's now open policy. It's the policy of the government. Kill Jesus. Now, originally, the high priest had the job for a lifetime, but when the Romans came in, they used their pressure. They didn't want a guy getting too much power. So they appointed high priests at their whim, their convenience. Caiaphas had the office from around AD 18, AD 36. But he had such contempt. But if he was basically saying, if you want to have the favor of Rome, and let us continue to exist, when it says to take away both our place, he's referring to the temple, to take away our temple and our nation. If you want that to continue, you got to kill this guy. Because the alternative is the Romans are going to destroy our nation and our temple. And you know what's so ironic about this? So unbelievably, their rejection of Jesus, Caiaphas' leading the way to reject Jesus, it didn't solve the problem because we all know history. And in 66 to 70 AD, in those 40 years, it was destroyed anyway when they followed false messiahs to their destruction. But John, writing this, John the Apostle writing this, moved by the Spirit of God, I think he sees the irony in Caiaphas' words. Because he tells you that Caiaphas made a prophecy that Caiaphas didn't even know he was prophesying. Caiaphas meant what? Jesus needs to die. Kill him. We need to murder him. But God here intends the words to be all about his atonement on the cross. And his death would be for the world. So Caiaphas says we need to kill him for the nation of Israel, for all the Jews scattered abroad. But God intended that it means Jesus needs to die for the nation and for the world. It's just amazing. It gives me the goosebumps to tell you the truth. So what happens after this? Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he would not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know, so they might arrest him. So I'm not a genius. That's how I knew there were many Jews around at the time, because it was near Passover, one of the 3 festivals they had to come to Jerusalem for. 2 miles away, we go and mourn for Lazarus. This place, Ephraim, is 15 miles north of Jerusalem. So he rested there. It was close to the wilderness of Judea. He had the ability to basically not get arrested and not get killed. So they looked for him at the festivals because he had been there before. We've seen it in the book of John. He's come for the Feast of Dedication. He's been there for Passover before. So now he's on the most wanted list. So I think if there's a takeaway tonight, take away Jesus' words, "I am the resurrection and the life," that he's the author of life. And don't lose sight of the fact that God's not happy with sin. Jesus makes that clear. And this is a message that we have to share with people today. So any questions or comments?
He did a lot of walking, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Holy cow. I mean, it had to be like 10 miles to Ephraim.
Yeah, 15 miles.
15?
Yeah.
That's like to Middletown and beyond.
Oh, yeah, when you trace the steps of his ministry, it's an amazing distance.
And he did it all in 3 years.
3.5. Yeah. Most people don't walk that much in their lifetime. Let's
How many miles?
3.5 miles, he said. No, what'd you say?
15.
15 miles.
He only walked 15 miles in 3.5 years.
No. From when he left. Where was he?
How many is it total? I'm asking.
Well, if you Google it, they say, I don't remember what it
I
is.
guess no one really
In
knows.
his ministry, somewhere around 21,500 miles.
Wow.
That's what he walked.
That was just from Bethany to Ephraim.
Do you think his sandals didn't really touch the earth?
That's almost around the earth.
Oh, his disciples
The
walked
circumference
so
of
I
the earth
imagine they were
is
touching the
way
ground.
more. So,
Well,
a long
That'd be
walk.
a lot easier.
So
Well,
let's
was
just
it
look-
a 12-mile ride is it called a day's ride? So if he was walking, say it would be half that. So typically it would probably be 6 miles in a day that people would really travel.
And he was teaching. It's hard to put that.
So it would have been at least a 2.5 day walk, typically.
So we are going to meet for the next, today's the what? The 1st? We're going to meet the 8th and the 15th. For those listening, the 22nd and 29th will be off, and then we'll reconvene on the 5th. So we will meet next week and the week after. So, I am also taking some time.
To enjoy the holidays.
I couldn't help but make that comment. But it wasn't entirely true, so now I confess. I am taking 2 weeks. Any questions or comments? All right, well, let's go to prayer. Father, we just thank you for this study, another statement by you that you are the resurrection and the life. And as we talk about what that truly means for us, it's really good news. And we don't have to walk afraid. We can have joy in knowing what will happen to us when we die. I hope this message from your word tonight spur each one of us on to tell the people who are in such fear today, those ones walking in darkness, that we have seen a great light, and that light is you, Jesus. Pray for this in your name.